Joe Burrow has been playing like the MVP of the league and has turned around the Cincinnati Bengals. He was the first pick of the 2020 NFL Draft after winning the Heisman Trophy at LSU. He took the Bengals to their first Super Bowl appearance in over 30 years. But who were the QBs selected after Burrow, and how have their careers turned out compared to him? Tua Tagovailoa was the first QB selected after Burrow.
With the 5th pick in the 2020 NFL Draft, the Miami Dolphins select Tua Tagovailoa.
He was selected 5th overall by the Miami Dolphins. Coming out of high school, he was a 5-star recruit and went to Alabama. At Alabama, Tua was an elite quarterback, and before the 2019 season started, he was expected to be the #1 overall pick. But after Burrow's historic season, he fell behind him. We all remember everyone saying, "Tank for Tua." As a rookie in 10 games, he threw for 1,814 yards, 11 touchdowns to 5 interceptions. His second season in the league didn't see much improvement, to be honest. The Dolphins made some essential off-season moves to help out Tua. They hired a new offensive mind coach, Mike McDaniel. Miami even added Tyreek Hill for him. In 2022, Tua had his best season yet, going for 3,548 yards, 25 touchdowns to 8 interceptions. He did that in just 13 games played. In 2023, he led the league in passing and made his first Pro Bowl. Before the 2024 season, he got a 4-year, $212 million contract to stay with Miami. Overall, in 2024, when healthy, he's been relatively good. The main issue with Tua is his concussion history, which got worse this year. We all hope he can avoid those hits in the future. While Tua has been a pretty good QB, he hasn't been elite, nor has he been good in the playoffs. Joe Burrow has clearly been the better quarterback so far. Justin Herbert was selected out of Oregon with the 6th pick by the Los Angeles Chargers.
6th pick in the 2020 NFL Draft, the Los Angeles Chargers select Justin Herbert.
Justin was 6'6" with a rocket arm and could move. His potential was very high, and that's why the Chargers drafted him. As a rookie, Herbert threw for 4,336 yards, 31 touchdowns to 10 interceptions. That touchdown mark broke the record for most touchdown passes in a season by a rookie quarterback. In 2021, he threw for over 5,000 yards, becoming one of the youngest QBs ever to throw for that mark. That gave him his first Pro Bowl appearance too. In 2022, he had another great season, throwing for 4,739 yards, 25 touchdowns to 10 interceptions. He led the Chargers to the playoffs for the first time in his career. All things were looking up for the Chargers. They had a 27-point lead in a playoff game versus the Jaguars. Surely they'd win this game, but in typical Chargers fashion, Jacksonville came back to win the game. In that offseason, Justin would get his big contract extension for 5 years, $262 million to be a Charger. The following 2023 season was a bit of a disappointment for Justin. While his stats were still relatively good, he missed 4 games and his team wasn't winning games. Heading into 2024, the Chargers changed their culture by hiring Jim Harbaugh. The team has clinched the playoffs, and Herbert's touchdown to interception ratio is his best of his young career. You can say Herbert has been more impressive than Tua. Jordan Love was the next quarterback taken by the Green Bay Packers out of Utah State. He was selected at the end of the first round.
The Green Bay Packers select Jordan Love, quarterback.
It was honestly shocking that a team who were the 1 seed with Aaron Rodgers would take a QB in round 1 instead of helping out their MVP quarterback. But all along, Green Bay knew what they were doing. It was another Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers situation. But Aaron said he wanted to help Jordan, and it wasn't his fault that he was drafted here. Well, for the first 2 seasons of his career, he sat and watched Rodgers win back-to-back MVPs. He set an example of how to quarterback in this league. Once his time came to start in 2023, he wouldn't disappoint. He ended up throwing for 4,159 yards, 32 touchdowns to 11 interceptions. Over his last 9 games that year, he barely turned the ball over. His final 8-game stretch included 8 passing touchdowns to 1 interception. He was looking like Aaron Rodgers out there. In his first ever playoff game as the 7th seed, Love went to Dallas and went off. He helped his team blow out the Dallas Cowboys while throwing 3 touchdowns. Packers became the first 7th seed team to win a playoff game. The following week, Love and his Packers battled all the way to the end, but Love's inexperience showed as he threw a wild interception when the Packers just needed a field goal to tie the game. Overall, it was a very great season by Love. Heading into the 2024 season, he was in need of a contract extension, so the Packers gave him a 4-year, $220 million contract extension. In the 2024 season, Love has played relatively well with some bumps. He's been dinged a little, missing some time. Overall, Jordan Love was a great pick that seemed like the wrong decision at first. Jaylen Herz was selected by the Philadelphia Eagles with the 53rd overall pick of the 2nd round.
The Philadelphia Eagles select Jaylen Herz, quarterback.
Coming out of high school, Jaylen was a 4-star recruit. He spent his first 3 years at Alabama, where he won a national championship. In his senior year, he transferred to Oklahoma to make sure he'd be the starter. Heading into the NFL, he wasn't going to start right away. Carson Wentz was the starter in Philadelphia, but after poor play from him, Hertz was named the starter in Week 14. As a rookie, in 4 starts, he threw for 1,061 yards, 6 touchdowns to 4 interceptions. Heading into his 2nd season, Hertz worked hard and improved. With a season of 15 starts, he threw for 3,144 yards, 16 touchdowns to 9 interceptions. interceptions. You can add 784 rushing yards and 10 touchdowns on the ground to that total. Jalen's first ever playoff game happened the season where he unfortunately had to face Tom Brady and the Buccaneers. The Buccaneers blew out Jaylen Herz and the Eagles in the wildcard round. Heading into the 2022 offseason, help arrived for Jaylen Herz. They traded their first-round pick for star wide receiver A.J. Brown. This paid huge for Hertz. He took his game to the next level in 2022. He threw for 3,701 yards, 22 touchdowns to 6 interceptions. Add his 760 rushing yards and 13 rushing touchdowns to that total. He went 14-1 in his 15 games that year and would have won MVP if he didn't miss 2 games. Jaylen finished second in MVP voting in the playoff series versus the Giants and the Niners. This led to a Super Bowl appearance versus the Chiefs. Jaylen played as well as you could have hoped in this game. After a tough Super Bowl loss, the Eagles started the season 10-1. They then proceeded to fall off so bad and eventually lose in blowout fashion to the Buccaneers in the playoffs. Heading into 2024, the Eagles added Saquon Barkley. So this season, Jalen's stats are still good, but the passing volume just isn't there. In 15 games, he threw for 2,903 yards, 18 touchdowns to 5 interceptions. You can also add an insane 14 rushing touchdowns to that mark. Overall, Jaylen Herz was a great pick for the Philadelphia Eagles. Jacob Eason was selected in the 4th round by the Indianapolis Colts. Coming out of high school, Eason was a 5-star recruit. He started his college career at Georgia, where he saw little to no playing time, so he decided to transfer to Washington for his junior season. He played pretty well for them and decided to forego his senior season to declare for the NFL draft. He was a tall 6'6". He can move a little bit, but wasn't very hyped as an NFL player. He barely had any playing time in the NFL and has bounced around practice squads. James Morgan was the next quarterback selected in the 4th round by the New York Jets. Coming out of high school, he wasn't as highly recruited as his peers in this class, a 3-star recruit from Wisconsin who committed to Bowling Green. He eventually transferred to Florida International, but ultimately in the NFL, he bounced around practice squads before going to the USFL this year. Jake Fromm was selected by the Buffalo Bills in the 5th round. He was a 4-star recruit out of high school and committed to Georgia, where he played 3 seasons. However, in the NFL, he only started in 2 games. He's bounced around teams and is on the Detroit Lions practice squad currently. There were 5 more quarterbacks selected after Jake Fromm, but none are noteworthy. As you can see, after Jaylen Herz was selected, the rest of this quarterback class have just been career backups. You might recognize names like Jacob Eason or Ben DiNucci. Next, we can talk about Joe Burrow. He was selected 1st overall by the Cincinnati Bengals.
The Cincinnati Bengals select Joe Burrow, quarterback.
As a rookie, Joe looked pretty good early on, but in a game versus Washington, he unfortunately tore his ACL and meniscus. This forced him to miss the rest of his rookie campaign. In 10 games played, he threw for 2,688 yards, 13 touchdowns to 5 interceptions. Heading into the 2021 offseason, the Bengals had a top 5 draft pick. They'd select fellow USC wide receiver Jamar Chase. Joe Burrow's favorite wide receiver is back with him. In the 2021 season, Joe Burrow and the Bengals broke out. Joe Burrow threw for 4,611 yards, 34 touchdowns to 14 interceptions. To add to that, he led the league in completion percentage and yard per attempt. The Bengals made it all the way to the Super Bowl that season, which was shocking. They beat the Kansas City Chiefs in the AFC Championship game to get there. In the Super Bowl versus the Los Angeles Rams, they lose by a field goal. The following 2022 season, he led his team to a 12-4 record, which was their most wins since 2015. Joe threw for 35 touchdowns to 12 interceptions. He led his team back to the AFC Championship game, but this game against Patrick Mahomes and his Chiefs, they would be the ones to lose by a field goal. Later in that offseason, Joe Burrow signed a 5-year, $275 million extension to make him a Cincinnati Bengal through 2029. The 2023 season was a disappointment for Burrow, as he'd get hurt and could only play 10 games. Joe Burrow bounced back in a huge way in 2024. He threw for a career-high 4,918 yards, 43 touchdowns to 9 interceptions. While this looked great from a personal perspective, his team only won 9 games and missed the playoffs. For him to put up numbers like that and miss the playoffs is insane. The defense didn't hold up their end for the most part. Overall, what do you guys think of this quarterback draft class? It's definitely up there all time. All these guys got contract extensions worth over $200 million. Joe Burrow and Jaylen Herz have both been and lost in the Super Bowl.